The spirit of vengeance must be pure, hence a righteous fire burns away his sinful flesh, leaving his naked bones, and then that fire becomes his protection and connection to God. Taken from the Book of the Keeper. Chapter 1. Help me, cried the young man. His anguished plea sliced the snowy night. The snow crunched under his feet as he ran frantically. The superhuman vigilante known as Cypher heard the screams. He had been searching for the kidnapped young man and the abductor. "I'm coming," he shouted out in the darkness that wrapped around the woods. In fleeting seconds, he raced over the shrubbery and came upon the scarred 19-year-old. Cypher realized that the victim was weak and had lacerations on his arms. "It's okay. You're safe now," said Cypher calmly. "Where is he?" "Close," said the panting man. "How close?" asked Cypher as he watched in every direction on the snowy bank for the kidnapper. A gravel and mature voice said, "Very." Cypher looked down at the man. But it was not a man anymore. It was a growing grey and black spotted creature. The beast held on to Cypher with steely hands. The last thing Cypher saw were the creature's wolf-like fangs rushing up to his face. "The SXET headquarters. You have to capture the Ghost Rider first," said Commander Myra of SXET, as she stood over the autopsied cadaver of Akam, the shapeshifter. T'Challa and Ororo stood on the other side of the autopsy table. They were looking at the familiar grey and spotted remains of the ancient killer. They had a similar dead body of Akam in Wakanda. Like Myra and the Ghost Rider, the couple had been made to believe that Akam was dead. But he was alive and killing freely. "Why do we have to take on the Ghost Rider?" inquired Ororo, raising her blue eyes to the commander. "He and I fell out over certain issues regarding my handling of the case," replied Myra. "You were working with him?" asked T'Challa. "Yes. I placed him as a consultant like I'm doing with you too. He was already on Akam's trail through Africa, by the time we got the scent. He claims that he can sense the evil from Akam, and then he found out that Akam had a Wakandan accent, which brought me onto you," said Myra. "We'll talk to him," said Ororo. "My people will find him for you." "Shouldn't be too hard," stated Hill. "In the meantime you can stay on site." "We'll be on our plane," said Ororo. "Very well," said Myra. "There is another issue I want to speak about. Blaze accused SXET of having a leak. I have done an investigation and found nothing to substantiate the claim. Could you do a search of your own?" "Sure," said Ororo. The Wind Rider was not surprised that Myra was so trusting, because the entire SXET program was based off Ororo's UN Mutant Police Task Force. SXET was in charge of dealing with international superhuman criminals. Akam was the organization's first serial killer and cannibal. He came to their attention when his teeth marks taken from the remains of his victims showed up in several countries. He targeted both humans and superhumans. The superhumans he would lure into traps and then end their lives. When SXET thought they had caught him, the organization held an international press conference. The media then called Akam the cross-border cannibal. Embarrassingly, SXET had to confess to the public that Akam had eluded capture. The Black Panther, Storm, and Myra left the medical section and went their separate ways. T'Challa and Ororo waited until they were on their jet before speaking about Akam and the Ghost Rider. "So Akam gave us the slip," commented T'Challa. "The question is, how many of those duplicates is he capable of creating?" Ororo remarked. "Hopefully not much, otherwise we will have a never-ending problem in catching him." "What about Blaze?" asked Ororo. "He is temperamental. We may have to subdue him first to get a chance to talk." "You're right. Also, I'll call Shuri and have her check on the Akam body that we have." Maybe we can run some tests on both bodies and a few clues may pop up, said T'Challa. In the meantime, I'll set up the microbots' surveillance of the SXET headquarters, said Ororo. The communication monitor buzzed. It was Myra on the line. We found him, she said. He's in Stockholm. He just busted up a gang, but as usual he has run foul of the police. They are chasing him right now. I'm watching it on my other screen. Tell the police to stand down, said T'Challa. Can't. I'll have to go through the proper channels and that will take time, explained Myra. Wait, hold on a minute. What's going on? Asked Ororo, while she used a computer to coordinate the surveillance. He just went into hyperdrive, replied Myra. All right. The satellites still have a fix on him. With a trail of fire that long he isn't hard to track. Okay. He has crossed the Kattegat and is in Denmark now. Give us the coordinates. We'll teleport there, stated T'Challa, reaching for his time-space sword. All right, said Myra. Chapter 2 Denmark, the Panhead, 2-valve cylinder, V-pushrod engine mellowed as Johnny Ghost Rider Blaze braked the chopper motorcycle, and he then brought the beast of a machine to a standstill. The ethereal flames that powered the motorcycle died out, as well as the fire that swarmed on Blaze's head and hands. He sighed in frustration of having to once again flee from the authorities when he was just doing what a higher power had put him on Earth to do, avenge the innocent. He wore a biker's leather jacket and pants since they were the only things that reminded him of his father and his roots. Sometimes, Blaze reminisced on his youth as a circus stunt biker. Those were the days before he had the weight of divine work on his back. The clothes and the motorcycle were all he had of a time that he would never have again. A golden light appeared nearby. Blaze turned towards it. The light disappeared and left two people, the Black Panther and Storm. You two, muttered Blaze, since he recognized them. What do you want? To talk about Akam, responded T'Challa. Myra told you about him, good, said Blaze. She wants us to work together, said Ororo. I'm never working with that woman again, Blaze said flatly. Why not? Inquired Ororo. Because I don't like the woman. By the way, have you met Akam? Asked Blaze. Yes. Apparently he tricked us the same way he did you, responded T'Challa. But we can work together. Sorry pal. You can work with her, but I have a killer to catch. I'll be seeing you, said Blaze. His yellow hair lit up in an oily fire, which moved over his head while devouring the flesh. It looked painful, but Blaze remained silent. Moments later, a human skull with deep red eyes were staring at T'Challa and Storm. The motorcycle roared like a grizzly bear while the wheels combusted. Blaze rolled the throttle and turned away from his guests. The motorcycle reared up like a Mustang and it shot forward, leaving a stretch of fire in its wake. The Ghost Rider disappeared from sight. I'm on it, said Ororo, as she flew forward and accelerated. T'Challa took out his Kimoyo and locked onto Ororo's Kimoyo signal. Hopefully, she would stop the Ghost Rider and then the Black Panther could teleport to the scene. Ororo concentrated hard as she flew on thermal air currents. She used the Earth's magnetic force as a means of shooting herself after the Ghost Rider. She caught up to him and went alongside. The speed at which they were traveling meant she could not speak to him. Ororo fired a bolt of electricity into the front flaming wheel. She watched as the motorcycle wobbled and it snapped out of hyperspeed. The Ghost Rider crashed into a car-scrapping yard. Blaze was tossed from the motorcycle with a force that would have killed an ordinary human. He was thrown against a wall of cars, which then collapsed on him. Ororo floated above the sheet of cars. Blaze, I know you can hear me, she shouted. It does not have to be like this. Just listen to reason. She could not see or sense him in the rubble, because of the type of supernatural energy that powered his gifts. But he has to be there, Ororo thought. The cars began moving on their own. Ororo could see flames shooting out the engine hoods. What's he doing now? She pondered. The bodies of the cars became enflamed as they separated from the heap. They drove away in several different directions. Ororo looked carefully at the space the cars had vacated and the Ghost Rider was gone. He must be in one of the cars, thought Ororo. The beaten-up cars accelerated and drove about the scrapyard. But their intent was clear. They were headed for the fences. Nice trick, said Ororo. She ascended further and it gave her a paramount view of the scrapyard. She extended her hands and manipulated a wind vortex around the scrapyard. The phenomenon swirled up the cars that made it to the fences. Then Ororo concentrated deeper and forked lightning shot down from the sky. They lashed into the cars that meandered through the scrapyard. The Ghost Rider's motorcycle quietly stalked the Wind Rider. The driverless machine roared to life and it raced up a hill of cars. The motorcycle used the momentum to make an astonishing leap at Ororo's back. She saw the danger in time and fired lightning from both hands to fend off the attack. At that same instant, a flaming chain flew onto Ororo's right arm and it coiled around the appendage like a snake. Then the Ghost Rider yanked the chain downward. His superhuman strength meant that Ororo was plucked out of the air in a heartbeat. T'Challa emerged from the teleportation and he caught his wife. He quickly made sense of what was happening, so he drew his sword. He cut off the chain with a quick side slash. T'Challa landed skillfully on a mountain of cars. He checked on Ororo. Everything okay? Fine, said Ororo, and she checked her arm. It was not burnt. Wakanda's Secret Service file on the Ghost Rider stated that his flames only harmed evil ones. Let's get him, said Ororo. A breath of cold air escaped from her lips. Her pupils were hot white. The temperature around her and T'Challa dropped dramatically to 0. Snow and ice covered the scrapyard. T'Challa used his hypervision to locate the motorcycle. It lay a few yards from the heap. He wouldn't leave without it, thought T'Challa. The Ghost Rider strolled into the couple's view. Stop following me, he said. Unless we work together, Akam is going to continue, said T'Challa firmly. Let's put this bickering behind us. I found Akam on my own before. I'll do it again, said Ghost Rider. But can you catch him by yourself? Asked Ororo. The Ghost Rider glared at her. We are willing to compromise if you are, said Ororo. We'll work with you and leave out Myra. You're playing games, shot the Ghost Rider. No, said Ororo. It is your choice. Take it or leave it. All right. I'll take it. But if I find out you are sidewinding me, then it is over, said the Ghost Rider. He pointed his finger at the motorcycle, the machine healed itself in a yoke of yellow and blue flames. Then the vehicle drove up to its master. T'Challa and Ororo glided down to the Ghost Rider. So where do we start? The Spirit of Vengeance asked. Chapter 3. So you are cutting me out like that, said a pissed-off Myra. It was the only way he would come on board, stressed T'Challa as he peered into the Kimoyo's screen. Why am I not surprised? You vigilantes do keep to yourselves. Well, guess what? You will not be bringing in Akam. The SXET Corps will. I promise you that, said Myra harshly, and she hung up. T'Challa looked at Ororo and shook his head to indicate that the conversation with Myra hadn't gone well. Aurora was standing a few feet away with the Ghost Rider. "Okay then. How do you track Akam?" she asked. "I picked up a scent for his evil." Myra branded him a serial killer. "But that is slightly incorrect. We believe that he kills to feed himself," said Aurora. "But what about the superhumans he slaughtered? He even took their abilities," pointed out the Ghost Rider. "We haven't figured out how and why he does that," confessed Aurora. "In the meantime, he is traveling swiftly across the continent," commented the Ghost Rider. "He never stays in one place for long." "Was Akam in Sweden?" asked Aurora. "He was there briefly. He took 2 innocents and disappeared again. And because of those bozo cops, I lost his trail," responded Blaze, while flesh returned to his body. "Also, didn't Myra mention the weirdo calling himself the messenger?" "Who?" asked T'Challa as he approached. "He is also after Akam, and he had information that only Myra and I knew at the time," explained Blaze. "He tried to stop me from taking down Akam, so I dealt with him first." "Meaning what?" quizzed Aurora. "I dropped a building on him. I knew he could withstand it," said Blaze dryly. "He wore a white uniform with a ninja mask. He was as strong as I. My penance stare didn't work on him." "Did he say why he wanted to save Akam?" asked T'Challa. Blaze walked towards his bike. "Yeah, he did. Said that he wanted to grant Akam forgiveness." Warsaw, Poland. The Jaroslaw halfway house. Anthony Jaroslaw had gone by a different name several years ago. Back then, he was a priest who had worked on death row prisoners in a small forgotten prison. The inmates during a breakout burned down that prison. And it was Jaroslaw who had freed the prisoners. Voices had told him to show the prisoners mercy and forgiveness. Voices that Jaroslaw believed were ordained and had given him great abilities. He took a new calling in life, helping the damned. At the halfway house he provided sanctuary and counseling for hardened criminals. His works were held in high regards because of the results that they brought. None of the patients at the halfway house reverted to a criminal lifestyle once they left. Akam would be Yaroslaw's biggest triumph, since the former priest had never treated a serial killer such as the cross-border cannibal. In Yaroslaw's capacity as a renowned criminal psychologist, he had contacted Myra and used his telepathy on her, making the woman his informant. Presently, he called her to find out the latest news on Akam. Myra told him about T'Challa and Aurora. "Interesting," he thought. "Also they are dealing with the informant," said Myra, who was in a trance state. "What?" asked Jaroslaw, stunned by the revelation. "They could be listening right now," he thought. "Jasmine," he said in a rush. It was a code word that triggered a hypnotic state in Myra's mind. She would put down the phone and have no recollection of the conversation. Jaroslaw hung up the phone. He heard a knock at his office window. Akam was on the outside of the window, then he vanished. Jaroslaw stood sharply. He went to the window and opened it. There was nothing threatening outside in the night. A car passed by on the street below, but that was it. It was him, he thought. "Why are you following me?" came a gravel voice from behind Jaroslaw. He turned around slowly to show that he was not afraid. "I have a message for you," he said calmly. A menacing Akam was on the other side of the office. He had seen Yaroslaw's battle with the Ghost Rider. The shapeshifter was curious to find out the reason for the intervention. "Which is?" asked Akam. "I can give you a new life. One of peace and forgiveness, if you will allow me," answered Jaroslaw. "Just look into my eyes." Akam's pride made him stare bravely into the man's white eyes. Jaroslaw used the telepathy that had given him control over the other deranged criminals. He took a peek into the rivers of depravity and slaughter that ran through Akem's thoughts and memories. He saw that Akem was ancient and uncontrollable. "Get out of my head," snapped Akem, and he sprang forward. He grasped Jaroslaw by the neck in order to break it. Jaroslaw countered by creating psi blades on both hands. He stabbed one into the hand that held his neck. Akem roared in pain and he released the man. Jaroslaw seized the opportunity and he struck the other blade into Akem's side, but not to cause a mortal wound. "See, I have spared you," said Jaroslaw. "You didn't come here of your own will. You were delivered to me so I may help you. But it seems you need to be broken first." Jaroslaw launched a fierce foot thrust into Akem's stomach. The impact sent the shapeshifter through the wall. The flooring trembled as though a rhinoceros was charging on it. A hideous roar came from outside the office. Elsewhere, the rehabilitated criminals and staff were running out of their rooms. Jaroslaw saw a blur of Akem racing into him. It was followed by the sensation of flying. Jaroslaw had been punched out of the office and into the empty street. The fall should have broken his bones, but nothing happened. Jaroslaw heard the voices. They told him to get up. "Yes, I hear you," he muttered. Akem landed softly in front of Jaroslaw. The cannibal mentally activated another aspect of his powers. He summoned the ability of a superhuman he had devoured. Fire erupted from Akem's skin. "Burn," he said in anger. Jaroslaw somersaulted to the left, avoiding a tongue of fire that shot out of Akem. Jaroslaw landed and fired a psi blade from his hand. The weapon struck Akem in the abdomen and it weakened him. Chapter 4. T'Challa, Ororo, and the Ghost Rider teleport onto the street. Jaroslaw saw them, so he scrambled to Akem in order to shield him. "Get away now, you're injured," shouted Jaroslaw. Akem swallowed his pride and he ran for the nearest sewer. T'Challa and Ororo pursued. Jaroslaw tried to intercept them, but Blaze held him with a chain. "You're going nowhere," grunted the Ghost Rider, pulling the chain. Jaroslaw broke the chain with a psi blade. "You are interfering in the work of a higher calling. Then call on whoever's bidding you do work for, because you are going to pay for assisting Akem," said the Ghost Rider. Blaze pulled a short shotgun from inside his jacket. He fired 3 times at Jaroslaw. The man stood his ground, believing the rounds would not harm him. The flaming projectiles struck his left leg and shoulders. They were made from spiritual flames that came from a creature claiming to be an angel. Jaroslaw screamed in pain while he fell forward. The Ghost Rider walked over and he held the man up by the collar. "Hurt, doesn't it?" said the Ghost Rider. "Why was Akem here?" Jaroslaw stabbed a psi blade into Blaze's temple. "He came for redemption," said Jaroslaw. Blaze released him and staggered. His head racked and he couldn't see straight. The spirit of vengeance struggled to get back his bearings. Jaroslaw was in pain, yet he managed to move out of Blaze's reach. "You know what he did and you still want to protect him," shot Blaze. "Compassion and belief is what is needed to bring him around," said Jaroslaw. "Nonsense," shouted the Ghost Rider. "He's pure evil." "It is not for us to judge," stated Jaroslaw. The Ghost Rider began seeing clear again. His body was re-energized and the righteous fire burned brightly. "You haven't got it as yet? I was made so that evil would see itself. See its true nature and be horrified by it," said the Ghost Rider strongly. He commanded the chain to straighten, so that it became almost like a staff. Then he twirled it in his hand. The Ghost Rider slowly advanced at Jaroslaw. The man concentrated and he fired off 2 psi blades. The Ghost Rider parried the attack with the chain. He punched Jaroslaw in the throat, thereby knocking the wind out of the man. Jaroslaw collapsed unconscious. Not before, a mob of his patients stormed out of the halfway house and confronted the Ghost Rider. Chapter 5 The Black Panther and Storm used their natural night vision as they chased Akam through the sewer tunnel. The couple turned a sharp corner and found themselves in a predicament. There were two scents of Akam that were in two different directions. One scent was heading further down the tunnel and the other scent of the creature went up to the surface. He duplicated himself again, said T'Challa. I'll take the one on the surface, said Ororo. She hurried to the pavement and saw a condor-sized bird fleeing into the sky. She remembered that Akam favored to transform into such a large bird. Storm concentrated on dropping the temperature around the bird. In a flash, the bird was frozen. Ororo pointed to the falling statue and fired an immense bolt of plasma energy. It dissolved the bird. That's the end of that, she said. She elevated into the sky and scanned the area in case Akam had duplicated himself again. But she saw nothing that pointed towards that. Meanwhile in the tunnel, T'Challa gained on the other Akam, or rather the monster allowed the Black Panther to reach him. Akam stopped and he faced T'Challa. Do you really believe that I would run from you? Asked Akam. I have seen how you and your wife operate. So I had to remove her from the picture. Now it is just you and me. T'Challa swung his sword in his hand. A leaking pipe dripped onto the dark force energy blade and the water ran down to the hilt where the golden time-space computers, disguised as Panther seals, were located. You think I don't know that, said T'Challa. After I'm done with you then I'll deal with your sister. And I will have succeeded in wiping out Bashan Ga's descendants. Or so you think, said T'Challa. T'Challa lunged at the beast. Akam broke off into two completely new beings before the Black Panther could reach him. So T'Challa faced two beasts. The double Akams moved swiftly out of harm's way. Like that trick? Asked the Akam on the right. The attackers grew multiple appendages that had razor-sharp tips. The Akam slashed at the Black Panther. T'Challa was struck about the body while he was still following through on his first attack. I need a diversion, thought T'Challa. He took a laser knife from his uniform. Tossing up the knife, T'Challa severed the power core with a slash of his sword. The knife exploded and shined like a sprite. The sudden glare blinded the Akams. T'Challa kept his eyes closed and relied on his hyper senses. He made two diagonal slashes at both Akams. Then T'Challa opened his eyes. The lifeless Akam slumped to the ground. T'Challa then contacted Ororo. I got him, T'Challa said. So did I, said Ororo. But do you think that was all the duplicates? Honestly I don't know, admitted T'Challa. I can see the police heading for the halfway house. I'm going there. I'll meet you. T'Challa concluded the call and then the sword teleported him and the bodies to the front of the halfway house. Chapter 6 The Ghost Rider's penance stare had driven most of the patients into a catatonic state. They were lying on the street when the police arrived. Jaroslaw was still unconscious. I can't wait around for the Black Panther and Storm, thought the Ghost Rider as he watched the police cars. He got on his motorcycle. Then he saw movement in the sky. As a spiritual being he saw certain aspects of the world that were hidden from humans. One such aspect was the creature called Balthazar. It was a dragon-like beast that was so long that its body went right around the world. That meant Balthazar's head and tail met in the middle of the earth. The Ghost Rider knew that Balthazar was born in Africa. A friend from the continent had told him that. He also knew of the titanic power that the creature possessed. So seeing Balthazar slowly moving made the Ghost Rider pause. Balthazar then vanished. This can't be good, said the Ghost Rider. Ororo came down from the sky. Blaze, she said. The Ghost Rider looked at her and his mind returned to the matter at hand. Where is Akam? We got him, replied Ororo. T'Challa appeared with the bodies. The Ghost Rider got off the motorcycle, and he examined the bodies for himself. We can't be 100% sure that he didn't get away, commented the Ghost Rider. So I'll be on the lookout for him. Blaze pointed towards Jaroslaw. Make sure he gets the proper justice. We will, said T'Challa. All right. I'll be seeing you then, said the Ghost Rider. He got on the motorcycle and sped off towards the police cars. The motorcycle reared up and leapt over the vehicles with ease. Let's get out of here, said Ororo. The sword took the couple and the prisoners back to the SXET headquarters.